Abe here, and I wanted to let you know that if you're able, you can upgrade your small beans skill over at patreon.com/smallbeans. Here's why you should do that. If you pledge 5 measly beans a month, you get access to about half our podcasts that you don't get if you're just listening to the free feed. Shows include Star Trek The Next Futurama, Spiel Boys, Like Razor Blade Pie, and bonus episodes of I'll Show You Mine If You Show Me Yours. Not to mention bonus content including info and updates on the movie we're making, Papa Bear. Hey, where's all the reasons to not subscribe to Patreon? I can't find them. Anyway, back to the show. Hey, Adam.
Hey, Abe.
What type of kid were you in high school?
I thought a lot about, do I fit into one of these personality types? I tried to be a jock because, in my core, I was a nerd, definitely. Until I got to be 6'3", and then
and you're just dunking on everybody.
Certainly there was more fear in my high school than there was before, but I didn't fit neatly into either category, really.
So tyrant, like terrifying.
By senior year, tyrant. No, I've never been a tyrant. But I think it's very telling when I watched the movie we're going to talk about today. It was Michael Anthony Hall's character that really resonated for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's the one I'm like, yeah, I know what you're feeling, buddy.
Would it surprise you that the one that I connected to was the
Claire.
Allison? No, I was Allison Reynolds, dude.
Really?
I was Ali Sheedy.
That made sense to you?
I don't know. I think I just had a crush on her.
She is. There is something about her. I understand. So, but you're really you're between Andrew and Bender, right? That's who you are. You're between those two guys.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I ever was a Bender. I think I was because for the first 2 years of high school I was a jock, and then some drama happened in my social circle.
This is a thrill. I love this.
That I definitely was like instigating, or I was the emo one. I was the one who was like, "You guys, fuck you guys.
I don't need any of you anymore."
And that led me to go like, "So who am I? If I'm not a jock, who am I?" And I was like, "I know, because of all this drama, I'm a theater kid."
Leaving jock world is a big move in high school, because that is it's
the most dramatic thing you could do.
Pretty much. I mean, I don't know what it's. I feel like high school's probably different. Like in terms of what are the casts than it was for us, like in that 10-year range that we would be in high school-ish.
I mean, they look different, but it's all the same, man.
So you think there's still jocks and nerds and...
I don't think it's jocks and nerds necessarily. I think those are pretty evergreen, so I bet there are. But it's just the point of the human animal, when forced into like a system that they have to run for the first time. We'll find caste systems because our brain can't compute. We need an other. We have this xenophobic like thing. Maybe we've bred that out of the beast, but I just don't think so.
Oh no. I
think you get out of it. Like the whole point of teenager is to defeat that demon, so to speak, and some people never really do. But like a lot of people, that's the purpose of teenagers, is you go, oh yeah, that was dumb. I shouldn't have been that way. That was dumb.
I guess. You know? I mean, like, and then you think about college though, and a lot of college is
still
about
the same.
Finding a cast. You know, like
I think that's just a little bit more advanced teenager. Like high school and college is like basically the same thing. You just have more control and drugs are now involved.
or always were, Abe. Let's be honest, my dude. Let's. I mean, I'm not asking you to confess your crimes on the mic here, but let's be honest here, buddy.
Yeah, I'm a big drug man. Yeah.
Abe, Mom. Drugman
Mom
Epperson.
And Dad. I'm drugs.
Your parents have never listened to a single podcast you've made.
I don't think
I would bet
they care.
Oh yeah. Mine don't either. I love it about them.
It kind of like I'm like the Allison Reynolds. I'm telling you, man. All right, let's get into it.
Sure.
I'm Abe Epperson. That's Adam Ganzer.
Woo!
And this is Directorpiece Theater.
Sure is.
We're big time director guys. We're Hollywood.
Big time.
We're like really important and
Yeah.
stuff. And no, we just like to tell you about like our experiences with directing by watching movies and trying to find some of the charm of movies that you wouldn't even go, that's an artistic film. That's a really well thought out film, to show you that like there's craftsmen and women everywhere in the industry, and they're bringing some heat, some serious heat. And let's talk about that heat. And this time we're talking about The Breakfast Club.
We sure are. The Breakfast Club. Yeah, that's right, baby. Put your fist in the air because we're doing it.
Put your fist in the air for no reason.
We're doing it.
For goddamn no reason.
That's right. No reason whatsoever.
He did it?
Yeah.
I guess he did it.
He did that.
He did it.
That is totally the experience when you watch it now. You're like,
just
he
like
did
in
that.
the movie, you're like, oh, that was a nice little like resolution. Everyone's a little bit closer.
Yeah.
And, oh, everyone's dating. Okay, cool.
Okay,
and then
sure.
He's on a football. He's on a football field, and he's like, "I fucking won."
I did.
It's just like, I guess he won, dude.
I guess you did it. I guess you did it.
So good.
Got a new earring finally.
Got a new
earring. Anyway, so
oh, you know that Bender is gonna sell the shit out of that diamond earring for
who
booze.
wouldn't? Who would not do it? Anyway, so do that. Get ready to blame everything on your parents. It's Breakfast Club time. So, I've probably watched this movie a minimum of 6-7 times, I would guess.
Really?
Oh, I love
this
this
is the
movie.
second time I've seen it since I was like 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so then you probably noticed as much as I did how it has aged. Like, it felt somewhat relevant for most of my young adulthood, and it feels pretty aged out now.
Yeah, there are a bunch of Holden Caulfields for sure.
Yeah, it's very white, and their problems seem very superficial in a way that, and I don't mean that they are, because I don't think they are. I think their problems are very real and painful to them, but they definitely seem like, man, your life is fairly simple compared to the complexities that exist in the world.
Right.
But like, it's also a little aged out because the characters feel more distinctly like types. Like
they're archetypal.
Yes. Yeah. And I can't tell if it's because the movie was so seminal that it was imitated a lot, and that means that now we've seen so many movies trying to be The Breakfast Club that we don't recognize why it was fresh at the time. Or, as I was saying earlier, that the social types that exist in high school and college now are not so clean. Like they feel a little more loose or fluid than they did in this time period. I don't know, but it definitely you feel it when you watch the movie now, I would argue. But that said, I think that anybody who's a filmmaker, especially at the early part of their career or when they're trying to get a film off the ground, would find or does find The Breakfast Club to be inspirational, because it is effortlessly great at a few things. One of them is it's emotionally very deep, and it gets there in an honest way, which is very cool. It also kind of defies the hero's journey in some ways. You know, like it's not, it doesn't identify its protagonist very clearly. And it doesn't go on a clean arc in the way that you might expect. It's nostalgic before selling nostalgia was like the way to make people interested in something, you know, and that's kind of cool. It had a huge impact, like way outsized of an impact for the scope of movie that it is. Like if you're a Gen Xer, or like an older millennial, this movie is a seminal movie for you, probably. Like it feels like this is what movies should be, right? Like there's a lot of people like that in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Like, and you can feel it getting quoted in stuff like sitcoms from a decade later and stuff, you know? But perhaps more important for our discussion than any of those qualities is that it's actually super cheap to make this movie. Because if you have a cast of the quality that this cast is, then you're set. Like, this movie is easy to make in that regard. And he being John Hughes, who wrote and directed this movie, got great actors for this, all of whom were sort of at the beginning of their career. And I think some of their peak performances, like Anthony Michael Hall, name a thing he was better in than this. He was great in this. Judd Nelson also.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Judd Nelson, who was in sitcoms and did a lot of cool stuff. This is the role he will always be remembered for. You know, he was amazing as Bender in this. And if you get a cast,
St. Elmo's Fire.
Hey, I like St. Elmo's Fire. You know, it's fine.
Yeah.
But would you say that he would be remembered for that instead of this?
No, you're right.
You fucking Bender. Look at you. Spit in your own mouth like a real goblin. Anyway, so look, you get a good cast like that, especially, which it's not easy to do, but if you hire the right people around you, you can do that. And then you get like a local high school, you shoot it in the summer, or in this case, in May with a closed school, and it costs almost nothing, and it's a great opportunity to prove yourself as a director, because the risk is lower. And in fact, that's exactly what happened for John Hughes. He wrote this film, he'd written a couple of hit films, and he still had to kind of pitch the studio, hey, I want to do this as the director. And they're like, but you've never shot anything. And his selling point was, well, this is a low risk film to make. It costs almost nothing. It's going to be made in a high school, and it's one location, right? And so they're like, all right, fine. And this was supposed to be his feature film debut, but he ended up making a different movie first, which was 16 Candles, another film that's worth remembering for different reasons.
Yeah, Hughes came in hot.
Hughes had a fantastic 10-year run. He made 10 fucking incredible films or something like that. And
he was occupying, it's crazy to me that he occupied a space that previous to had just not been occupied,
kind of,
which was, I'm gonna make movies for this specific a generation.
Yeah, he was, in a weird way, he was the movie equivalent of a beat writer or something.
Yeah,
where
he, formed a genre in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's not like it didn't exist. There were movies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and other stuff, but this movie in particular was very much like no, we're not going to make a spoof of high school from guys who have been away from it for 20 years.
Yeah, we're not doing National Lampoon's version.
Correct, which he wrote, by the way. He wrote all those National Lampoon movies. Yeah. So he also knows that genre, but he wanted to really tell it like it is to the degree that a filmmaker can, Now the problem with this film is the same thing that makes it easy for a director to cut their chops on it, which is it's a movie that's in one location. And when I say one location, what I mean is we're shooting over 75% of this movie in a single room. And that presents a huge challenge for a filmmaker, which is, how do you keep a film in a single room visually interesting?
This is extremely my shit right now.
Right, because movies are about change, fundamentally. They're always about growing and changing. And if that's true, when you write a movie that takes place in one room, how do you communicate change if you don't have new spaces, new color palettes, new production design, the kinds of stuff that directors lean on to communicate that stuff visually, right? This movie is so grounded, it can't bring stuff like that in because it'll feel like it violated the reality of the film. Further compounding this problem is this guy's first shot as a director, which means he doesn't really know how to use camera that well. And I think I'm not criticizing his camera work. I'm saying he doesn't have the wide palette of tools that someone like, say, I don't know.
He's probably,
Sidney Lumet, right? Sidney Lumet made 12 Angry Men. That's in one room. But Sidney Lumet was a veteran director by the time he'd made that film.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think you can see when you watch the film that this director has a visual sensibility, but not a lot of camera knowledge, because almost nothing fancy happens in camera. Right.
Yeah, but the strategies are very sound.
Yes.
I didn't even, I kind of read your theory before I rewatched it. So I knew what to look for.
Yeah.
But it was, there's some intelligence in the way it's shot for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about how did John Hughes overcome this obstacle to make a film that has resonated for at least one generation as one of the greatest high school movies ever made? So the first thing he did is, and this sounds very obvious, but he picked a good room. Right?
Yep.
He picked a good room. Now, when
directing is casting, even if you're casting a room, cast a good room.
That's right. So I say that because you're like, come on, Adam. It's like, wait, think about this. If you're writing a movie about detention, okay, on a Saturday, what are the chances that a real high school would put kids in a library like this? Like the one in the Breakfast Club. They would never do that because, number one, you can't guard the exits. Number two, they might get in there and destroy all this stuff when they're not being supervised, right? Like, that's a real problem.
Yeah, that's why it usually happens in gyms and stuff.
Right. In a big, giant prison. You know what I mean? Like a prison yard, basically. And in a sense, this felt real because they felt locked in and because these kids probably wouldn't destroy everything in the room. But John Hughes had to pick a room that had a bunch of different areas in it in order to create a sense of change, but not actually change the location, right? Yeah. So one thing he does is he's consistently separating the room into various spaces where there will be distinct sequences and scenes.
Yeah, it's huge.
Right, it's a huge room, right? Like it's huge and it's picturesque.
Yeah, it's when I first saw it, like I've totally forgotten what it looked like, but when I was reading this theory and then I looked at the first shot of the room, which is just a normal kind of like wide shot of the five of them sitting at those desks. I was just like, oh, baby, that's a banger of a room because you can see all the stairwells, you can see all the levels, and like there's just you have so much to work with.
And it's such a perfectly like it's a little bit of a dated room for the time, but it's well decorated, so it's pleasing to look at. A thing that you need for the audience to still care about the film an hour in. Right.
Sure.
So like he separates this big room into these spaces that he will use for dramatic purposes. And the film actually culminates on the ground of a sitting space that's off to one side, a space you're not even really looking at for most of that film. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what that means is like on a theoretical level is he's going to use all these little spaces and corners of this library in a meaningful way. Right.
Yeah. Like movements. Like
Correct.
Act 1 happens mostly here. Act 2 happens mostly in these spaces.
Correct.
You know?
So the most meaningful thing he does in this way is he uses the second floor for emotional purposes. When people are getting more and more exuberant or making a really important point, they use the second floor. Okay.
Yeah, that's so on point.
And
dude.
It's one of those like
so good.
It's one of those things where it's like, well, why don't they just have whole scenes up there? Because if you have whole scenes up there, you don't have the emotional impact of the occasional towering over somebody that the second floor offers.
I'm telling you like it is. I'm looking down upon you.
So this taps into a thing that sometimes when I teach directing classes, I will call the lizard brain. Right. And by lizard brain, what I mean is there are core things in human perception that have emotional meaning. One of them is if you look up at something, that thing has power over you. That's just like a way human beings feel. Is it always like that? Not necessarily, but it's like from our infancy, we were trained looking up at our towering parents that those big things have power over me. Right. And
only a few things are powerful and at ground level, like sharks.
Right. Right.
That's all.
Only sharks. Thank you for adding that.
Yeah.
I think Hughes is actually very smart because he does use it for those purposes, but he also uses the second floor in this way that satirizes the order of high school, right? This is the given order. And Bender is constantly using the stairwell or the railing or the second floor as a way to sort of stand above the status quo of high school and poke holes in it. And he also uses it in this other way that you rarely see, which is transcendence. He gives people the power of transcendence, right? So like the end
they're out of their system that they're placed at the beginning, which is in your box, in your desk.
Right. Like the dancing section and the weed smoking section, both incredible things to happen in a movie where they're in detention. They both happen upstairs, right? Emilio Estevez's dance spasm and scream that shatters glass, that's upstairs.
That is the wildest thing in the movie.
What is that? It's clearly for jokes.
What is that?
It's for jokes.
It's for jokes, I know, but it's just like, but there's not really, there's not like reality shaking jokes in this movie. It's the only one.
John Hughes gets away with a few things that are, and now we break the narrative because it's funny. Like, like he does a few things that would belong in like one of those Benny Hill cartoons, or not cartoons, but like those old sketch shows.
Old sketches, no. I think it's early days meta humor. Mm-hmm. We were aware just a little bit, like wanting to be meta, but didn't really have a structure for it in place because we hadn't seen people absolutely nail it. You know,
I think it says something about how well the movie's working that Emilio Estevez is able to scream and shatter glass, and you're not like, this movie is stupid.
It's true.
You know? And it works. Yeah. So that happens upstairs, though, right? Like on a very literal level. They have transcended the desks they are chained to, right? Which they are supposed to not move. That's like the first thing we learn in the movie. Okay, so
yeah, very cool.
A second thing he does with the locations and this one location problem is he constructed the script, because he's also a writer, in such a way that we get breaks from the big room right when we need them. Right. In fact, he writes in problems that don't need to happen just to get us out of the room. Right, Bender separating from the group is basically done for the reason of, let's get out of this room for a little bit so we can go somewhere else. Also, there's a unique feature to Bender separating from the group that I think actually adds a lot of meaning to this movie, which is that Bender is the only person who sees the adult world without the filter of being a kid. Right, like when he goes off and confronts Vernon outside of the group, we see rage and violence on Vernon's part.
We see adults talking.
Yes, we do. And I think it's really interesting that John Hughes wanted that to be in this movie. You know, because when I watch it now, I find it very disturbing. I thought
he grew up really quick.
Yeah,
he's beat by his father. You know,
right? And I thought of this as being like a little more of a disposable threat when I was younger. You know, but now I watch it and I'm like, oh no, this Bender getting away from the group is the only way we see how Bender really gets treated, because we never meet his family. So we never know for sure if Bender's telling us the truth or not. Right?
And I like how he hints at it early.
He is.
Like a good writer, he does this thing where early on in Act 1, their first interaction is like, he's like, I'll give you I'll give you another week of detention.
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 weeks, 2 months, you know, like.
Right.
He's like, yeah, I'll have another. I'll have a fucking another. Give me another. I don't care. And it's just like the fact that he does not care. Like it could be 100 weeks.
Right.
He's like, the fact that he has no reverence for his own time or anything like that. That's some dark shit.
It is dark.
Like even the darkest, like, fuck everything kids that I knew growing up, they could still be, you know, like subdued. They could be broken by a few weeks, because it's like, but I still want to enjoy myself.
I have something to look forward to that this is costing me.
Right. It really does mean he has nothing to look forward to.
Correct. That's right. So we do know that Bender's pain is real from earlier in the film, but seeing this older man threaten to beat him up some years later when he's really an adult is really haunting. And
speaks to the generational trauma that the movie's about.
It does, right. It does, and because you see the fear in Bender's eyes, and the sadness, just like, man, I don't deserve this from you, and he's right. Bender doesn't deserve that from him. Anyway, the only way we get that kind of honesty, like we get that breaking into this high school conversation, is by taking Bender out of the room, and that's very clever. Right.
Yes.
It also makes the movie feel more grounded in the sense that it's not Ferris Bueller when Bender leaves. Right. It's now we're into really dark shit when we get away from that room.
Right. It's not all happy fun.
Right.
You know, even Ferris Bueller has low points, but it's more of like, no, I don't know who I am. My dad is he little
ignores me.
Oppressive, but right. I'm fucking rich, and my life is great.
It's true.
That's not true.
It's not true. Bender is facing deep problems, real problems. So another time we get this is there's that very silly excursion to get a soda that feels earnest in the way that, like, you just aren't going to sit in a room. Like high schoolers just aren't going to sit in a room for 9 hours. They're not going to do that. And it felt very honest, but also it was like, you got to get them out of this room. Otherwise we're bored. Right.
A little bit.
So this running sequence, completely arbitrary. There's no reason they don't need to do it, but it feels truthful because we don't want to be in the room any more than the high schoolers do. And that's kind of the subconscious thing going on by making a one location room is
there's also a psychological effect of the charm of like they're now a team working together
right.
somewhat.
That's right. And again, that's all clever screenwriting, but it's smart from a directing point of view because you got to know when your audience is ready for a break. You got to know that. If you don't know that, then the movie's not working.
Dynamics.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is where the next thing we want to talk about is what I'll call blocking, and I'll define that in a second. John Hughes' blocking in this movie is very subtle but extraordinarily effective. And what I mean by blocking is that where we have the actors move and sit and what we have them physically doing, not even so much what they're saying, that's also part of directing and acting, but where they are physically, what they're physically doing, that's blocking. And I would say Hughes' best work as a director is on display here in the way that he blocks with Bender. Right? Bender, the first thing you see him do after he walks into detention is he shoves Brian out of the seat in the middle of this desk setup.
Because he's a disruptive influence.
Correct.
And that's the whole point.
Correct. It tells you exactly who he is, right? But also it tells you exactly who Brian is. Like it's an act that gives us a lot of meaning. Okay, and then it does this brilliant, further thing of setting up what is this, who are these people, what do they represent in high school, right? So to do that, I'm going to examine this first sequence, like where are people sat and what does it mean, right? So, because I would say that's where we start socially in this movie, not where we end.
Right.
So in the first scene, right, not scene, but first sequence basically where we're in detention, in row one, we have Claire, played by Molly Ringwald, and Andrew, played by Emilio Estevez. And they very much represent the establishment, right? Andrew...
The jock and the
Andrew
princess.
He's a successful jock. He's going to get a scholarship, right? And she is, even though she has her problems, she's the popular girl. She's high school, prom queen. That's who she is. And they represent, by sitting together in the first row, that they're in agreement about the way the world works. Right, there's a kind of egalitarianism for them.
They share the same table.
Yes, they share the same table. Right now,
the first table, the king's table,
the one that the front-facing one, correct. Now, the second row is Bender, but also Bender took that row. Right, he didn't have to sit there. He could have sat in the back or some other place. He takes it from Brian, and the best thing about it, of course, is that it's literally in the middle of everybody because that's Bender's role is to get in the middle of everybody's shit. He is the center of the conversation, which for the first half of the movie, you almost think it's his movie because he is driving everything in the plot. And then it's, he sort of starts to take a back seat for the latter half of the film.
Right, because he kind of coaxes out of them their desire to get real.
Yes, that is his job. He is a cattle prod for reality, right? And Hughes is constantly making that happen by where he makes Bender move. Right. Sometimes when he's not making progress, Bender will then get up on a rail and sit higher than them to provoke them. Right. That happens in the first sequence with Emilio Estevez. And what it does is it creates a new emotional perspective for every point that Bender is actually making. Right.
One could say that he's bending their perspective.
One could say that. Put that earring in. Put your special earring in for that point.
Please insert girder. Sorry, I can't help it. Every time you say Bender, I just think of "Shut up, baby." I know it.
I know it. I know. Ever tell you he stole my cigarettes? That actor stole my cigarettes.
Wait.
The guy who played Bender in Futurama.
John.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. John DiMaggio stole cigarettes from
you? We were at a we were at a baseball game in a box seat for something. It cracked. I don't remember what it was. And he was in there, right? And it was like Dan and Soren's thing, and I got invited along. And I was downstairs having a cigarette. He's like, "Yo, can I have a cigarette?" Right? And I'm like, "Sure."
Yeah.
and then I got a phone call or whatever, and he just took the pack. Like they were just gone. It's like, all right, cool.
I love stealing. I love taking things. That's so good.
It's really good. Anyway,
that's a good story.
So Bender from this film.
Yes.
So Hughes is constantly using Bender, of course, to provoke people to reality, but Hughes is shooting this movie in a very direct, non-fancy way where all of the angles are basically from the point of view of one character at the point of view of the character they're talking to. It's pretty it's pretty standard. It's the way we always know where we are in the film, and
everyone on the same level.
Correct. Yeah. So when Bender sits up high, we get an angle that's from up high looking down at Emilio Estevez, and we get an angle from down low looking up at Bender from Emilio Estevez's point of view. It's very simple stuff. Okay. The fun thing about Bender moving around a lot is that it also creates a kind of emotional ambiguity about him. Right? Sometimes he's higher than us, so he seems reasonable. Sometimes he's literally lower than us, right? Like when he's got his face in Claire's crotch, and you're like, okay, so is this guy just a monster? Maybe, right? Like there's a sense in which
there's a feeling of unhinged.
Yeah, we don't know. Is he wiser? Does he know something they don't know, or is this all theater? Right.
Also, if he's the one orbiting them and constantly in motion, his shots will have new backgrounds all the time.
So we're not feeling the stagnation of the room behind us. Right. And that's a key ingredient. If we see the same angles over and over, we start to get bored with the space we're in. But Bender moving around means we take in these little spots in the space we didn't see before, so it feels fresh. It's really smart. Okay.
Really
now,
smart.
on the fringes of so like that is the main social unit, those three. On the fringes are two other characters. One of them, Brian, played by Michael Anthony Hall, wanted to be part of the main group, sat there on purpose, but was shoved out by Bender, a perfect metaphor for who he is, right?
Because he's a nerd.
Yeah, he's a nerd.
Though.
He's a nerd. He gets bullied. He doesn't have enough agency to stand up for himself, right?
Uh-huh.
And Hughes consistently finds ways to alienate Brian the whole way through the film. Until the very end.
He's a dick. Bender really is a dick to Brian.
Yes.
For the whole movie.
Yes. I think actually though it's a way of Bender. I don't like. There's a part of me that thinks Bender actually loves him too.
Like it's a tough love
maybe.
thing. Yeah.
I don't know. I can't defend that.
It's hard because it is from an older time.
Yes.
But it does rewatching it really just felt like ego.
It could be.
And I think Allison points it out. Like, you're just being mean to people.
Sometimes.
That's all you're doing.
Sometimes it feels that way. But see, he also says things like, and this is just about the writing, really. He says things like, you see, like, Claire, are you part of the physics club? And she's offended by that. She's like, that's an academic club. And he says, but you see, to nerds like Brian, they're the same. And he was right about that.
Yeah, he's insightful.
Yeah.
It's true.
So I don't know.
But the second that he gets threatened, it speaks to his damage more than anything.
That's right.
Everyone is flawed.
That's right. He's not a hero.
He's not wise.
Yeah.
He's not necessarily wise. I mean, he may say wise things, but when it comes to himself, he's just as lost as all of them.
I think that's right. I think you're totally right. So the other character, and is the Abe of the group, I guess we'll agree to.
Yes.
Allison, who sits as far away from everybody else as she possibly can.
So cool.
It's great because she is relentlessly working on finding ways to quote unquote push people away, and yet every physical thing she does is also about getting attention. Every single one of them, from biting her nails to the way she makes her sandwich to just the way she jumps in on any of that. She desperately needs attention, and yet it's always in this but I'm so gross, don't look at me, right? And her arc is great because she needs to let people actually get physically close to her. That's what the movie's about. And it culminates in two physically close acts from both of the high school royalty, right? Claire and Andrew get close to her with the makeover and the physical kiss that happens at the end of the film. And it's really rewarding for that reason.
Yeah. She has the glow up.
She does. And it seems very lame, but it's a really cool physical way of manifesting her inner problems, right? Where she sits. It's so obvious. She also does this great thing where she gives us just different points of view on the group. We're looking at it from a different angle. Which we need emotionally, but we also need just to break up the stagnation of the same old formations, right? So
yeah, exactly.
So this physical, where they are at the top of the movie, is the fundamental emotional relationship between the characters, and every single movement these characters make after that is a blocking choice that gives us new emotional information, new ways to look at the room they're in, like the prison they're in, which is a metaphor for high school, and new ways to experience the actual space in which the movie takes place. Right? And it's great. It's so simple, so rewarding. In the final sequence in the library, by the way, after the dance montage, we end with all the characters that are not Bender sitting on a rail, so higher than they were, next to each other.
Right.
They're all on the same level. They are all equal. They are all elevated from where they were when the movie starts.
Right. Yeah. It's like the simple just ascension.
That's
simple,
right.
Like they go up. Why? Because they have learned a little bit about each other and themselves, and they gain friends. That's all it is.
But they learn something, and it's great. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the technical camera piece of this, because, this is Directorpiece. We love talking about that. I want to talk a little bit about lenses and a little bit about camera movement. So, Abe's getting really excited. Abe's making a sandwich out of Doritos and stuff.
Yeah. Yes, I am.
Surprisingly, the lens work here is pretty standard, with two exceptions. Okay, so in the beginning of the film, like when we get into the library for the first time, Hughes uses more wide-angle lenses than he uses for the rest of the film. Okay.
He also uses more wides.
Yes, more wides and more wide-angle lenses, both things.
Because as it goes, it isolates the groups. Because
correct.
Now it's about the inner psychology.
Correct.
Yeah.
So probably, it also might just be like, because we've all been first-time directors, the feeling of I need to make sure I show the room so you know where we are and where everybody is.
True.
Right? Like,
it's typically how things go.
Yeah, they have a thing that they teach in film school a lot that people get their brains sort of locked into called establishing wides. And young filmmakers, which means we're showing a wide that shows where the room is, right? And young filmmakers get like married to this idea. I got to show the wide first so we know where we are. You know what I mean? And great filmmakers don't necessarily feel beholden to that.
That's right.
But this is his first movie, and so he felt like you need to see the library. You need to see where they are. But after that, as Abe so eloquently elucidated, he then starts to settle into mid-range and long-range lenses to separate people into portraits, right?
Yeah, he really goes for it too. He it's like 70s, like it's up.
They're pretty long.
Not just they're pretty long. Yeah. And something I noticed also kind of with your previous conversation about like the backgrounds, it's like it kind of helps you keep the room a little different. Yeah, it's kind of a boring shot because it's just blurs of color, but like it doesn't make anything feel familiar. You know what I mean? So it does actually make the room not feel bigger or anything like that because it's actually compressing the space. But it's like it's making the backgrounds feel less important to you. So
Correct.
You don't really acknowledge the fact you're in the same room and these are the same just single shots and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but I'm sure you'll
Well,
talk
no, you're
a little
exactly
bit
where I
about
wanted
this,
to go.
but-
It
Cool.
literally hides the background by putting it out of focus. So it
Right.
literally separates them from the room, right? Which is one of the great things. And by the middle of the film, you don't even know where in the library they are.
Right.
Funny enough, I think the wide-angle lens does one thing that we need geographically, which is it shows that gigantic statue in the middle of the library that John
And the stairwell.
that John Hughes will use later in the film just to show where they are in relation to the statue. Right? The statue becomes this like grounding thing, like, oh, I see, they're over there. Got it. Right?
Also smart.
It is smart.
Ground the geography so that you can be less reliant on your wides and your shots.
It frees you up later to do whatever you want with camera. Now, this is like a small observation, but it's really important. One of the reasons the room is well chosen is that it's big enough to accommodate shooting on a long lens. You see, when you're shooting on a long lens, you have to get much further away from your actors and from your, the subject of your shot because by compressing the space, you have to get a larger distance from the camera to the subject, right? So in most rooms, shooting on long lenses is very hard unless you have 10, 15, maybe even more feet between you and the subject. And then it gets hard to hide the camera crew and all the gear, like to light it becomes more challenging. So he chose this big wide open space that allowed him to shoot on longer lenses.
A lot of distance.
Yeah, that's really smart,
I was thinking of this when you were talking about the height thing too, because if you are shooting in a small room and you still, because there's basic stuff, you want distance between the camera, the subject, and the wall background, so you can light it well, and you don't want to shoot someone against a wall because it will look bad. The lighting will look bad. Mm-hmm. So if you're in a smaller room and you want that visual strategy of like looking up at someone, what do you see in that background if you have to get closer to the subject and you look up? You're going to see the ceiling.
Yep.
Now the ceilings are like crazy tall in this room, but with all of the with all the telephoto lenses and the distance that it can attain, you can look up at someone, still achieve that look, that eye line, and still have the background be wall and have it look visually interesting.
Yeah.
It's really kind of like, I don't even know if he thought that out, but when he chose that room, it's one of the biggest benefits of the room for his visual strategy is he can still make it look
This
good.
May sound like really detailed and technical, but you guys should know when you shoot something on a sound stage, even though you have a lot of space to move around in, they don't have ceilings. Right? They have grids where lights are hung and stuff. So shooting straight up in a studio means you have to create a ceiling. You have to make it. And shooting on location, the advantage of it is you don't have to fabricate the space. You have it. That's the space. But usually you don't have enough space to work around in it. That's the trade-off between working on location or working in a stage. In this case, because he selected a great location, he didn't have that problem, which is really smart.
Right.
Okay, so just to like tie together this long lens thing. So I think the long lens also serves this very subtle, like meaningful choice as a director. It's not just hiding the space, it's that it's also obscuring the spaces in the library where meaning will happen later in the film. Because very much like the social strata that's very front and center with this high school cast, ultimately it's when they get away from that into these little corners of their lives they don't explore. That's when something meaningful can happen, change can happen, and his long lenses make that possible. Obscure that for us so that we get the feeling of a journey later on, even though we're still in the same room. In terms of camera movement, there isn't any. There's very little. Almost none.
I don't.
Almost none.
I think the only pan is like the scream shot.
There's a few window shot. There's a few tilts and pans. Like there's a few up top to kind of introduce characters. They're extremely rudimentary. Like the kind of thing that I'm sure Abe did and I did. I did more complex stuff in my first student film. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing super complicated here. There's a couple of dolly moves that are clearly designed to assist with the point of view when somebody moves, like Bender in the beginning sequence. But basically those moves are just that, all that stuff's there just to like set up, the frame of the space. Otherwise he's shooting almost exclusively in these static portraits, except for 3 specific camera moves. There are 3 designed ones, and 2 of them are actually, I think all 3 of them maybe. No, there's 2 of them are about characters falling in love. Right? So the first one that I'm thinking of happens when Andrew first actually engages with Allie. It's about middle of the film, and she says something that he doesn't accept about her. Like she makes some sort of self-deprecating remark, and he pushes a little further at her because now we know, oh, he likes her. And that move is there to tell us that he likes her. That's the move. And cool, like a cool fact about it is we match it later when she comes out after the makeover. Like she pushes camera, so there's a dolly backwards as she pushes camera, and it sort of matches emotionally the effect of Andrew pushing in on her, and we know these two love each other. And it's great.
Yeah.
There's a similar move between Bender and Claire later in the film. When I was writing this, I was having a hard time tracking down where it is, but it's subtly woven in, like you almost don't feel it, where it's like, oh, there's something here. There's actual heat here between these two. But there's like those even are somewhat subtle, like they're pretty standard camera moves. There's really one move that is the move in the movie. right? It's like, this is the one camera move. And it's a big giant dolly, and it's on Emilio Estevez's character for his monologue at the very last sequence of the film. That is when he finally gets honest about what it is with his dad, right? Like what his life with his dad is, and the pain that he's going through about the pressures of trying to be an athlete and not being able to fail.
And not feeling what, obviously, like having, like, the destructive streak is not in him.
Right.
He's not like, he feels for the people he's bullied.
He doesn't want to be this guy that he's being. He's literally living somebody else's idea of his life.
And because he feels terrified to not be that guy.
That's right. And there's a really big, on a circle dolly track move to give us the sense of how big of a moment this is for him. And I think the other director instinct there is, we got to move here because it's the turning point of the film. Like when this guy finally gets honest, the rest of them can be honest,
Right.
And it's
because he's the height of success. He's the white male, jock.
Right. That's right.
He's top of the food chain, kind of, so to speak, in this ecosystem.
That's right. And in a sense, I think that monologue is also the closest we get to directly addressing the themes of the film. It's not the most memorable lines in the film, but maybe the moment that we all remember the most from it. And the director's instinct was, I got to do something to highlight that. And that thing was camera motion. And it works. It's fine. There's nothing super fancy about it, but it works. And it does it's a nice way of breaking up the feeling of static postcards that we've been getting the whole other rest of the film. Finally things are breaking loose. Finally we're moving a little bit, So the strategy, if I had to sum it up so far from Hughes, has been find a way to obscure the space, find new ways new formations to shoot the group in, find blocking that creates emotional connections that are new for each of these sequences, and use a very little bit of movement at the most crucial times. But the system is fairly static, actually, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where that's what I would sum up so far. But then Hughes does one thing in that final sequence that breaks the system, that is a really cool way of understanding what the film is about. And that thing is, he splits the eyelines. So what I mean by splitting eyelines, very, very quickly. So like
with Brian.
Yes, right? With Brian and Claire. So what I mean by splitting eyelines is, where I put the camera in a conversation determines where somebody should be looking if they are looking at the correct character, right? So imagine Abe and I sitting at a table, and then imagine somebody put a camera to my right, okay? And if we're looking at Abe, like his shot, right? Abe would be looking at the left side of frame to see me. And if you saw a camera angle to Abe's left, you would see I'd be looking right. And it would feel very normal. Like we'd be having a conversation.
Yeah. If you were to put them side by side on a piece of paper, there literally would be a line that you could draw between the two.
Called the 180 line.
That connects. Yes. And that's what the 180 line is designed to create. Correct. Is the idea of the eye line being consistent. But the idea of putting them on side by side on a page and having a single line connect, that's the concept of an eye line.
That's right.
And it's how our brain interprets people looking at each other.
It's a way of very simply and easily making us feel grounded in the geography of the place, right? And this movie is meticulously shot from point of view angles that do not violate the 180 line, right? And it's shot from, here's who this character's looking at, here's the shot of the character reacting, and I know where they are, and they're all looking at the right side of frame, whatever that side is, the correct.
I think that's important for an ensemble.
Yeah, because
you have so many people, you need to know where everyone is.
They
at all
often
times.
say in film school, shooting a group scene is the hardest, or shooting a dinner table is the hardest thing, because you have to keep track of points of view. Right, and without violating
and you have to think like an editor and almost create a thread that can get you through that sequence of dialogue, as opposed to being able just to cover it and saying, here's a shot for this person. Well, aren't they that? If you're getting a single of that person, are you from this side of the table or this side of the table or this side of this person? And like, there's too many decisions to be made, so they call it complex and hard to do, because you are just absolutely overwhelmed with, are you on his right shoulder,
Exactly.
left shoulder? Are you over
you get
there
in,
on
you
that
get in
person?
these arguments, and I think even great directors occasionally get in these arguments because staying in the correct side of the line is important for not confusing the audience. Not confusing. Now, the great directors know how to use this to create meaning, as I'm going to show you in a second. But another simple example of it is, if you ever watch the interrogation scene between the Dark Knight and the Joker, Batman and the Joker in the movie Dark Knight, that's a director who's constantly jumping over the 180 line to show you who's winning the fight. Like it's a really simple way of understanding this concept. Anyway, so all this is to say, our director has so far been extremely conservative about where the camera is placed. Okay, and like just wants us to comprehend where we are in the space. Then in this final conversation where they get honest with each other, right? We have that dolly move from Andrew where he gets honest and we start to get more intimate. And then there's this key moment where we jump to a new wide that's from the side, right? From an angle that's between Brian and Claire. And we haven't seen that angle. And then Brian asks this question, and the question is, are we going to be friends on Monday? What's going to happen on Monday? And we get an angle on Brian that feels correct. It's like, like that's where he should be looking, right? But then we get this angle on Claire where Claire is looking off to one side when she looks at Brian instead of on the correct, I'm putting that in quotes, the correct side of camera that would match Brian's. In other words, the eye line is split. There is a conflict in their relationship. We feel like she's not looking at him directly in the way that she should be, right? And it's all based on camera placement. It doesn't trigger us like, where are we? We know where we are. But the angle sort of suggests this feeling of she doesn't actually feel close to him, right?
They are disconnected.
Yeah. Maybe there is a real problem here. And then she says, no,
we're not going to be friends.
Let's be realistic, because Claire hasn't truly grown yet. But the cool thing about this is that he's actually setting us up for the next moment, because the next moment is that Bender does his most intense push of the movie at like, who are you? How dare you? Right. And we get this great sort of like one-on-one shot with them, or it's like a single on him and a single on her. And the angle that we were looking at her from when she was talking to Brian is perfect for her looking right at Bender.
Right. He like ratchets her forces her eyes
to him.
Like it's like, now it's just between us. Correct. Basically is what Hughes is doing. And he's like, now you know where everyone's looking, because you're looking right down, almost down the barrel.
And we see that this is actually the thing the movie's been building to, is Claire being like, Claire's social status, her belief about her social status being destroyed. And Bender is the only person who can do it. And Bender has earned their credibility in a way enough to do it. That's when you realize, that's why we get the fist pump at the end, I think, because this moment in the film.
Because he's like, I broke her.
I made her love me by hurting her. Yeah.
By nagging her until she loved me.
It is gross from that point of view. But I think I think
it's hard. It's in the right place.
I think so, right. I think that's right.
It's not a great line.
Well, they do have that great line that he says, like, wouldn't I be great to as a tool to make your parents angry at you, right? Like he's that's smart.
Like he sees himself as being used regardless of the system. So he's like super self-aware.
Yeah, he knows what it is. The point is that the director made a really smart choice there to telegraph for us this moment that was coming between Bender and Claire, just from the angles that we used, that created a sense of dissonance. That was the core dissonance of the film. In a strange way, Claire not being able to acknowledge Brian is the core problem in the film.
Right. And emotionally, this whole sequence is like people starting to go, whoa, do you guys feel what's in the room between us? I think this is something that's bigger than all of us, right? And everyone's like, yeah, I kind of am feeling it too. Let's all start to share. And then Claire is resistant, and it's like, snap you back into place.
She's the one that has to admit it is all a facade.
She has the most to lose.
Right. That's right.
Know? Because even the king, the proverbial like jock type, is like, to me, he knows that that's not who he is deep down. She doesn't know that that's true about her. She's like, no, I like my status and I want to keep my status as princess. I don't have any problems with who I am. And it's like, well, don't you though? Don't you have a problem with what it does to people? She's like, I guess I do. And then once she realizes that, we've now
That's
grown.
what's so cool about the movie is like they all accept even her small offering of like camaraderie. Like when she does that thing with the lipstick where she like puts it between her breasts and like puts on her lipstick, and they're all like, she was honest with us. But Bender's like, no, she wasn't. Like Bender's the one that gets it
compared to dude just talked about almost trying to kill himself.
And you did a parlor trick. Congratulations.
And you did a little trick that you learned you pulled off because you're bored one summer in 7th grade.
Now I'm not saying that makes Bender good. I'm just saying that for like on an emotional level, he is the only one who could have pierced through this veil of acceptance that she has lived with
because he's outside. Because he's outside.
Correct.
I mean, I still think it's true that I think Bender is the right choice. Yeah. It's interesting that they made him. They also have the recluse character.
Allie,
he's the criminal. Yeah. But Allie is seen as just like the recluse.
He's a bit more of a.
And it's like they both have the ability to see outside of the social system.
He's a bit more of a Lear's fool type than she is.
Exactly.
She's suffering from a problem that can be fixed by high school overtures, like being acknowledged. Like that's what she needs, is to be acknowledged. He needs more than that. His problems are adult problems. Like he is beyond anything those people could do for him.
The system can really offer. Therefore, he has the most stakes.
And he has the most to offer them in some ways.
He has the most to offer to break down the system. He's kind of the revolutionary. She's just like kind of the nihilist or the doom scroller.
And that's why basically every major stroke of the film from a blocking and camera point of view is built around him, even though it's not necessarily his movie. Like he may not really have changed. I think the fist in the air is a way of saying that he did. That like him being with Claire is a change for him. But because that's him acknowledging I'm going to be part of this group now. I will be part of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's everything he ever wanted. Him being able to tell a bunch of people what it is and to be heard. That's the success.
So I'm going to wrap it up now. I love this movie still.
Yep.
Maybe because it's part of my childhood. It is problematic for all the reasons we said, but I think as a filmmaking exercise, there's so much to admire about how the economic and strategic shooting plan was kept the background fresh, actually. Kept us interested in an hour and a half movie that is in one room. And shows you that the craft of directing is fundamentally about capturing the emotional performances and setting them up to succeed. Like in this movie, some of the acting, especially Michael Anthony Hall, for me, like it's like, wow, he got so much out of these like 22-year-olds. Like he got a lot of great acting out of them, and he got out of the way so that they could do their work, and he set it up so that it had the most efficacy from where he was, like where the camera was placed. And I hope that any of you out there who are aspiring filmmakers, or really if you're just film lovers, I hope it shows you that a director planning strategically, like owning the limitations and finding a way to build a system for meaning and executing it, can make something profound and artistic out of almost nothing. That is the joy of our craft, and I think it's really on display in this film. And that's it.
So true. So fucking true.
Yeah.
Good work, my man.
Thank you.
I like this argument. I like the simplicity of design, and this really kind of cracks it open. It pries it open with a crowbar. I love it. Good stuff.
Now we're just going to pump fists forever. Also, the song at the end is, for me, still like one of the great soundtrack moments. It's so good, man. You can't hear that song and not think about this movie. Like, it owns that song now, right?
It kind of is. They're definitely tied together.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was pretty funny that even though like the ending, it does kind of happen. Like even though they earn it, it does kind of happen suddenly that it's like everyone pairs off together. Except Anthony Michael Hall with the letter, like because he writes the letter for the crew. There's this moment which I laughed out loud at, which everyone is pairing off. It's literally a cut to them like making, doe eyes at
couples,
each other.
Right.
Yeah, being couples and stuff like that. And then he finishes the letter and then he punches his arm. And I like to think that he's like, hey, arm, you'll be my girlfriend. It's just so like, everyone but the nerd.
Yep.
The nerds will be alone forever.
It's not.
He needs to find a nerd lady.
Well,
so everyone can.
I think we all know that nerds, that they do better after high school, right? Like,
yeah, that's also true that he is, he's like 14, he's like 15 in, like 1985.
I don't know how old
he's going to have the greatest.
Yeah, he's going to be just fine.
Time.
I don't know how old he was for this movie. He looks like a child though. Like he
definitely looks way younger than everyone else.
I mean, he's clearly not though, because he knows how to perform like some pretty subtle comedy. You know what I mean? Like the way, like his introduction, the way that he acts with Vernon is like maybe the subtly funniest thing in the movie. Where he's just like, very good, sir. Like he's
very good, sir.
He's really good.
He is 6 years younger than Emilio Estevez, Anthony Michael Hall.
I'm just doing some math now. So this movie was shot in
6 years,
84,
84,
and he's 55 now.
He's 55 now.
So that would have been almost 40 years ago. Right? Shit, he was almost 15.
He was 15.
Wow. Fuck, you were right.
Yeah, I calls him like a season.
Wow, he got a great performance out of a 15-year-old.
I mean, sometimes kids can just kill it. It just depends on the kid.
Yeah.
The Fannings. The Fannings. Everyone remembers the Fannings. The Dakotas and whatnot.
Yeah, but would you have seen them in a movie like this?
Yeah,
maybe I'm overestimating it.
I mean, it depends on the role, but like, yeah, the thing is that he's cast as a type that is kind of like a very shy kid, and that's not something that we normally can think of that a performer, like, because usually they're like when they're young, when they're 15 years old, they can do loud stuff,
right.
But can they do subtle shy stuff?
Right.
No, that seems like that's like a harder casting call.
Do they have access to the kind of pain that would cause them to have an honest moment like this in the middle of a conversation with their peers?
Right. But also subdued. You think
right.
of like what's her name in True Grit? Haley.
She was great. Yeah. I don't know her.
What's her name?
I don't.
Fuck. Why am I blanking?
I don't know her name either. But this is a good example because she was very impressive.
Like, because she is Haley Steinfeld, or Steinfeld, because she's larger than life, she has this thing. She's like, I'm going to be this, and I'm going to be 14 years old and go immediately on, Jeff Bridges level. And it's like, I own you, Jeff Bridges, and that it makes sense to us in a way. Like Dakota Fanning and Elle Fanning are the same way. As young children, there were almost wise beyond their years, and that was the appeal to them. With Anthony Michael Hall, he is a kid, but also at the same time showing an alarming amount of maturity for a kid that you would expect is
just want to clarify
kind of
it's not Michael Anthony, it's Anthony Michael. My bad. He was
Anthony Michael.
He was 17, not 15.
He was 17.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I got the year wrong, I think. Yeah, he was 17. Ali Sheedy was 23. Molly Ringwald, 17.
That's crazy.
Emilio Estevez, 23. That makes sense. Guess how old Judd Nelson was?
45.
No.
How old was he?
26.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Yeah.
He was
I
old.
knew he was going to be older, but like, damn, he's looking.
I mean,
good.
You could see it. Yeah.
You can kind of see it. Yeah, he's a man. That's crazy. What a crazy. Well, no, nothing's crazy about this. It's a fine movie. Good.
John
theory.
Hughes was 35 at the time. I know.
Makes me depressed, man. Shouldn't have told me that.
I'm not going to get depressed.
It's all right. I'll build my time machine and go back in time and make my movie then.
If you want to get really depressed, he died when he was 59.
That doesn't depress me. We got to get the old guard out of the way. If they're older than me,
okay,
get out of here.
Kill all directors. That's Abe Epperson's
Abe. That's my strat.
That's how Abe finally wins.
Until there can only be one.
Yeah.
But until then, you and I have a truce, you know?
That's true, yeah.
But like Highlanders, but like Highlanders, there's going to be a reckoning.
The prophecy foretold that this podcast ends in a death match.
Yep. And so one of us beheads each other, and the lightning strikes one of us, and here we go. That was great, my man. Cool. Let's start the wrap up.
Okay.
If you enjoyed this conversation, you can catch Directorpiece Theater. It's all on the free feed, so you probably listen to this through whatever you listen to podcasts. But hey, guess what? If you have a chance, if you stumble on over to patreon.com, you get a bunch of other you get a bunch of other content that you wouldn't get on the free feed. You get shows like Spielboys, like Star Trek The Next Futurama. You get bonus episodes of I'll Show You Mine If You Show Me Yours. You get Like Razor Blade Pie, and we have big news coming up in a few weeks here. Other shows. We'll have the announcement soon.
Yeah.
And you get all the episodes over a week early. So you don't have any reason not to come to patreon.com/smallbeans and throw some scratch, baby. That's it. Anything you want to add, Adam?
No, just don't forget about us. Don't you forget about us.
All right, let's grab our broadswords, and I guess we're going to define who's the true director. Yeah!